welcome to the Daily Geeky Pastimes Podcast, episode number 21. Today, the main topic we're going to be talking about is console gaming and PC gaming, that age-old argument. But I'm not just doing it to try and rile people up and get some engagement. I'm more I think I've got a slightly different take on it to a lot of people. I think I've got quite an interesting take on it that might change a few of your minds. So that's what the main topic of today is going to be about. But we do have some news stories first. And of course, don't forget to like as you come in. Don't forget to subscribe. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Google or whatever, please make sure you follow me there. It helps out a bunch. And if you want to check out the live recording, it's live every weekday morning on youtube.com/geeky pastimes. And you can subscribe there and turn notifications on to get notified when it goes live. And if you want to support the podcast, one of the best ways of doing is by becoming a YouTube member. It only costs $1.99 a month, or you can pay a little bit more if you'd like to, if you want to support me more. But it keeps me doing this full time, so I would very much appreciate it. On top of, obviously, all of the videos I make and the streaming and all of that kind of stuff. So let's get on with the news for today. The first one isn't gaming related, and I don't want to make this like a political podcast, but some things I think are just worth talking about, and it's just worth talking about to reach a broader audience than maybe, the normal sources would reach. So one of the little political things I want to talk about is that BP have announced that they made £4 billion in profits. It's about $5 billion in profits, which, it's a cost of living crisis. Energy prices in the UK have been absolutely skyrocketing. I'm not entirely sure what it's like in the rest of the world, but I know in France they've had a similar problem where fuel is, I paid nearly €2 per litre for fuel the other day when we were just near Paris. Just, at a tiny little garage at the side of the road kind of thing. Fuel for energy, fuel for petrol, for cars and stuff like that, has been insanely expensive to the point where over the last winter, thank God we didn't have a particularly cold winter, there's been lots of people, including us, and we're kind of fairly middle class, where we're like, oh yeah, we're not going to put the heating on. We don't really need to put the heating on. We can just wrap up in blankets and hoodies and stuff like that because it's too expensive to heat the house. That's a ridiculous state of affairs. And then for BP to announce that they made $4 billion profits. And when I saw that headline, I was like, that's disgusting. They should be trying their best to lower prices. They're providing a public service. This isn't like other businesses. If you're providing fuel and you're providing energy for people's houses, that is, I know BP and more the fuel side of it. But all of these energy companies, British Gas and everyone like that, and Shell have all been announcing ridiculous profits. But yeah, if you're providing a public service, I strongly believe there ought to be some kind of profit caps or something like that. Or they should be showing what they're doing to invest in renewable energy and to move away from fossil fuels to justify those kind of profits. But then the most shocking thing was about it. I read the article a little bit more. I was just reading this on the BBC. That was £4 billion in profits in 3 months. That wasn't even in a year. That's just in the last 3 months. So you think what? We're now in May. So that's April, March, February. It was probably realistically, it was March, February, January. So it's the coldest months of the year, and people are struggling. People are suffering. They can't heat their homes. They can't afford to run their cars. They're really struggling to do everything. And BP sitting here being hey, look at all this money we made. And it's that's just revolting. I would genuinely, if I was working for BP or Shell or British Gas or probably a million other energy companies that I don't know the name of, it's when people were working for the banks around 2008. It's surely at some point you have to look at yourself and be am I part of the problem with society? Is this an issue? When you're seeing the people who run these companies, or even not even the people that run it, but the people that are high up, and they're taking insane bonuses with millions of pounds or hundreds of thousands of pounds in bonuses, and then you've got vulnerable people struggling to heat their homes or struggling to run their cars and stuff like that. It's, I don't know, it's it's a really clear example of when people talk about wealth inequality in our culture, that, while productivity's gone up insane amounts over the last few decades, wages have basically stagnated or dropped, and the sort of standard of living has definitely dropped over the last 10 years or so. And there might be lots of different causes for that, but the solution definitely isn't to have a small number of people getting insanely rich while normal people struggle more and more and more. We just shouldn't have billionaires. Individual people shouldn't be billionaires. And these sort of giant companies that are providing public services shouldn't be making insane amounts of money. If an entertainment company makes billions, if Disney make billions, I don't really care. But if you're providing something that people need to get on with their life, then I think, I'm such a socialist. I'm all for like nationalization of things like energy companies and transport networks and things like that. I just think it's disgusting. Anyway, let's move on to gaming stuff. That's my little political rant for today. Just annoyed me. So Redfall has released and reviews have come out. Reviews weirdly didn't come out until basically when the game released. I saw some people saying like, oh, reviews didn't come out until 3 hours after the game released, but I don't think that's true because the game was like had a global launch. Like the servers didn't turn on till 1 a.m. this morning, and I think that's when reviews were allowed to come out. But Redfall's come out and the reviews aren't great. I think the Metacritic it's sitting on is like 65 or something like that. It's not looking great for the game. It's one of these things where, I got to play this a few weeks ago. I put out 64 at the moment. I put out a video based on what I'd played, and I felt like I was surprisingly negative about it. I felt like when I made the video, I was like, I'm being pretty positive about this. I'm giving him a fair shot. I'm saying, like, trying to focus on some of the things I liked about the game, but I also pointed out a lot of the things that were wrong with the game. And then when I saw all of the other videos coming out from other people that were at that event or at similar events, because they held events in like Paris and New York and LA at the same time, across the same sort of week, I watched a lot of those other reviews and I was like, oh, these people are being super positive about this. And, some of them that I know were literally in the same session as me. Like, I knew some of the sort of journalists and stuff that were there. I sort of recognized them, that they were in the same session as me. It's like, so they played the exact same thing I did, and they were super positive about it. And now the reviews have come out, and they're being super negative about it. And I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, to be honest. I thought there was lots of problems with it when I played it a few weeks ago. Straight after this podcast, I'm going to hop onto Twitch, twitch.tv/Geeky Pastimes, and I am going to be playing Redfall. I'm hoping to play some co-op with Flynn, but we'll see whether he's about. If he's not, then I'll just be playing some single player. But yeah, I'm going to hop on some Redfall on Twitch, and I'm probably going to have a good time with it. Like, I kind of know what to expect after playing it before. I think having your expectations maybe set a little bit lower often helps with everything, with films, with games, with like theme parks. Like if you go somewhere or you watch something or you play something and you kind of expect it to not be very good, I think then you tend to like find the fun in it a bit more, or I do at least. And then if you go in expecting something to be amazing, then it tends to be disappointing. It often can't live up to the expectations. I found that a lot this year, that like a lot of the games that I've played that other people have absolutely loved, like the Dead Space remake, the Resident Evil 4 remake, Jedi Survivor over the last week, there have been games where I've played them and been like, this isn't that good. Like, they're okay, but they're not like, I personally am not having the most fun with them. And then the games that I've played where other people have been saying like, it's not great, it's not amazing, I've really, really enjoyed. So like Forspoken, I thought was a lot of fun. I had a really good time with that. Dead Island 2, I quite enjoyed. I didn't like love it, but I thought it was good. It was like a fun time. There's just been a few games like that where it's like, hey, maybe me being out of touch with lots of reviews and stuff, maybe I should just completely ignore what scores I have for things. So I'm going into Redfall with the Twitch stream with a kind of positive mindset that I'm going to try my best to enjoy it. I'm going to have a laugh with it. And we'll see how it goes. We'll see how that all turns out. The next news story is something that, like, I don't really care about the news story, to be honest, but I care about the topic, is the new Meta Quest gaming showcase has been announced for June. So Meta Quest is what used to be Oculus Quest. So it's a VR headset that I think the big advantage of it really is that it's kind of an all-in-one headset. You put it on your head. You don't need to set up tracking stations. You don't need to connect it to a PC or a console. You just buy the thing, whack it on your head, and then you can play. And I've owned like 3 of these. I owned one of the original Oculus Quests, and I have owned 2 of the Oculus Quest 2s. I tend to buy VR headsets and then sell them like a few months later because they hold value shockingly well because they're quite hard to get hold of. And nearly all of them I think I've sold for more than I bought them for originally, or around the same as what I've bought them for. So I've not really lost too much money doing that. But yeah, like they're doing a showcase for this. So Oculus have turned into Meta now because Facebook own them and Facebook are all Meta. The person that invented it at Oculus. He left a long time ago. So it's a different thing now. And they're doing a showcase of new games. And I'm kind of interested in this on the basis of like, I'm interested to see where VR gaming's going. The big problem for me with VR gaming is that it's been a while now. Like, it's been a long while since the HTC Vive came out, since the Oculus came out, the Oculus Rift, the original one came out, since PSVR 1 came out. And over time, headsets have got better, although I would say they haven't solved a lot of the problems that the old headsets have. You know, they've solved some of them. Like, now you can get headsets that don't have cables, or you can get headsets that don't need tracking stations. You can get controllers that are much better and the kind of custom made for VR. There's lots of things that are better about the headsets, but they haven't solved the sort of essential problems of the headset for me, which is that like you feel super detached from everyone around you. You know, if it's not a social thing at all. If you are someone who plays games with other people in the room, like I often play games sitting downstairs on a sofa with my wife next to me, and it's like playing in VR is such a lonely experience. You're basically like, hey, I'm going to ignore you now for an hour and put on the headset. I need to sneeze. I keep doing this. I don't sneeze that much outside the podcast. And as soon as I do the podcast, I'm like, oh, I need to sneeze. But then it just doesn't come because I don't stop talking. What a mistake. Anyway, where's the like button gone? Yeah, if you can find a like button, please make sure you press it. And yeah, so I feel like that sort of blocking out the social stuff is annoying. And there's still, I would say, most VR headsets have been quite uncomfortable. I haven't tried like the HTC Pro or whatever it's called, or the Vive Pro or the Steam Pro. I don't know. There's like a fancy one, isn't there, for Steam that I haven't tried. And I haven't tried the PSVR 2. For what it's worth, I found PSVR 1 the most comfortable headset out of all the ones I've tried. But yeah, it's still not a fun thing really to put a big sort of machine on your head and cover up your eyes. It does tend to get kind of warm, especially when it's sunny. And I think like one of the other big problems with VR for me, which obviously isn't going to be a problem for everyone, but I think it's a problem for more people than maybe they'd like to think, is that you need a lot of room for VR, for a lot of VR experiences. Like room scale VR, where you can kind of wander around and interact with something and turn 360 degrees, is definitely a more enjoyable experience, and it's a more interesting experience. But I don't think that many people have a space in their house that they can dedicate to that. Like, as soon as you get to the point where, like, I think a lot of people expect you have to, like, move coffee tables out of the way, you have to move chairs back and stuff like that. That's going to stop you from using VR. Like, that's going to prevent you from playing it regularly, because you'll be like, I can't really be bothered. It's like, do I just hop on Warzone, or do I move the coffee table, move the sofa back, then get the VR headset on and play some VR? And it's like, I'll probably just play some Warzone. So it's like, I feel like there's all these little barriers to VR that puts it off. And it's like, the technology is amazing. Like, VR games are stunning. I've played loads of VR games, and loads of them have been properly amazing. Like, Werewolves Within was one of my favorite VR games, where it's just, you know, like a social game, like playing One Night Ultimate Werewolf with people, with strangers. But you could, like, see where people's heads were pointing and people were talking. And it sounded like people were actually talking where they looked like they were, which was very cool. Pavlov's a very cool, like, first-person shooter type thing. Beat Saber's obviously a super fun rhythm game. Like, VR became the home of, like, rhythm games, which was very cool. There's a lot of really interesting stuff in it. And there's some interesting, like, little experiences, you know, little Star Wars experience stuff. Star Wars Squadrons was really cool and stuff like that as well. But so many of them, like Half-Life Alyx and stuff, required that big room scale stuff, so that kind of immediately put me off. Anything where I've got to sort of stand and walk around and stuff, I'm just like, oh, I can't bother to clear a space for that. Like, my house is quite small, like that's quite a pain for me to do. So then I'm sort of stuck with the seating games like Werewolves Within, like Star Wars Squadrons. I'm sure Gran Turismo 7 would probably be amazing. I haven't tried it in VR, but I'm sure that'd be cool. But yeah, so then I've got a smaller set of games. And then you've got the problem that, like, there's just not that many VR games. And it makes sense that there's not many VR games, because there's not that many people who own VR headsets because they're very expensive and there's not many games for them. And that means that if a publisher wants to put out a VR game, they know that there's not many people that are going to buy it. There's not many people that could buy it. So it's like, you know, you always think you're only going to convince a certain percentage of a market to buy the game, unless you're Nintendo and everyone's going to buy your game. But, like, you're only going to get a certain percentage. And if that market is very, very small, that percentage is going to mean very few people. So it's quite hard for, like, AAA games to exist in that kind of VR space. And, you know, from my experience, I keep looking at buying a PSVR 2. I keep thinking about getting one. I can't really afford it. But I keep thinking, like, oh, I would like to play Gran Turismo. But then I look at the other games that people are enjoying on it, and it's like pretty much all games that I've played on other VR platforms. You know, people are still playing Beat Saber, people are still playing Superhot, because there just aren't that many high quality games, especially seated games, that are like coming out on a regular basis. And like I said, it makes sense why, but it kind of sucks and it's bad for the platform. So I'll be interested to see what this showcase is like. I think it could go one of two ways. It could go the sort of like, hey, we're actually putting loads of money into this, we're investing in it, we've got proper games from like high quality studios being made for Oculus Quest, and that would be super exciting. Or they could go the other way and be like, hey, look at these like fun little quirky social games and indie games, you know, games that don't cost that much to make, so it's not as much of a big risk. And you know them, I don't know if they're going to keep on talking about that stupid metaverse thing that Zuckerberg always goes on about, that they've spent billions on, but like it could be all stuff like that, in which case I'm not interested, in which case like I'm completely out. I'm done with like the quirky little VR games. I kind of want proper games in VR now, and I just don't think that's ever going to happen, which is a shame. Just having a quick look at chat. I haven't seen all of those things. People asking, why is my dashing younger brother doing the stream? Yeah, Tom's very busy. Beardy Tom is very busy. Couldn't be here, so I'm here instead. High Lord Terror said Quest is a great little bit of kit. It is seriously impressive for like the quality of the experience. Like even if the graphics aren't the best thing ever, you can have an immersive VR experience in the Quest, and it's literally like a PC you're strapping to your face. It's like a PC that's only like that big and only costs like, what is it, like 250, 300 quid, something like that. Like that's pretty amazing. It is an insanely good thing. There's just not enough games for it. You first used VR in 1992. It's come a long way. Yeah, I remember like distinctly when I was a kid, my cousin was married to someone who used to go sell software all around the world. He was like some fancy salesperson, business person, I don't know. But he was like the only adult I knew who was into video games, and he was always traveling to like New York and Tokyo and stuff, so I thought he was super cool. And he told me about some VR thing he went to, and it was like they had to like, pterodactyls were flying about and like picking people up, and you had to like shoot them and try and stop your other people from getting picked up and stuff like that. And that to me just blew my mind. Like that must have been in the 90s somewhere. And like, it probably looked crap, but because I didn't see it, I just heard about it in my imagination. I was like, oh my God, that sounds absolutely amazing. West Salty's talking about the thing later. Anything else? No. Okay, nothing else about VR. Cool. Let's move on to the next news story. We've got two more news stories. One is more of a public service announcement, a warning, and that is that Zelda has leaked. Tears of the Kingdom has leaked. Apparently the full game is out there 2 weeks early. People have managed to get copies of it. I think some of them might be, Nintendo sent out review copies, although they're normally quite careful about who they send them to. But I guess like probably some people have just got them from the normal ways, taking them from vans or factories that they work at, or even shops if they've sent them out early. But Zelda's leaked anyway. That's the point. That means there probably already are, story spoilers out there, gameplay spoilers, video stuff like that. I would strongly suggest, if you want to avoid spoilers, if you're like me and you want to go into games kind of as blind as you possibly can, you don't want to know everything about them, I get quite far just by muting loads of words on Twitter. So I go onto Twitter, mute words, even by people who I follow, and just like, because of IGN and Eurogamer and people like that. And then I mute like Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, TOTK, Link, like just mute as many words as you can that you think might be something to do with it. I've been doing that ever since The Last of Us Part 2, and it's worked pretty well. Like, Last of Us Part 2 was the last game where I had something spoiled for me. And I can't think of anything else that I've really had anything spoiled for me since then that was like about a big game. So yeah, if you want to avoid them, maybe consider just muting words. You can just do it in like, if you go onto Twitter and go to like settings and then privacy and safety and then mute and block, you can do it there and just mute words on there. Because, it's really annoying, because obviously what will end up happening is inevitably people like IGN and Eurogamer and Kotaku and whoever, if you follow any of them on YouTube, or you just have them sometimes show up in your YouTube recommended, like I bloody do, they'll have like thumbnails and pictures. I really hate it when it's like a game or a film has literally just come out, and then they'll have like some thumbnail that's showing something from quite late in the game or the film, and or a title that just spoils something. Like with films, you often get that where it's like, So, what does the ending of Guardians of the Galaxy 3 mean? And then there'll be like a thumbnail and it'll show something that's like spoiling the end of Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I really hate that stuff. Like, IGN and Eurogamer are really bad for it. Like, Eurogamer often put like headlines that just spoil something. They did something with the Mario movie where they were like, how did this Easter egg get into like the film or something like that? And it came out like a week before the film came out. And in the headline, it didn't say, how did this Easter egg? It literally described the thing. And it's like, oh, that would have been a fun surprise. But instead, you know, then when I saw the film, I was like, oh, yeah, that's the thing Eurogamer told me about a week ago. It's like it completely removed the entertainment from the process. I really hate that those articles do that. I know they do it because it makes money, but God, it annoys me. I need to get some WD-40 for this chair. I keep saying that. Maybe everyone, or maybe I'll like do a donation goal where I can be like, hey, everyone can club together and buy me a can of WD-40. I might have some downstairs. I don't know. I need to look. And then finally, my last news story for today, and this is something that I'm dubious about, to be honest. There is supposedly a trailer for Mortal Kombat 12. Now, I'll let you decide, is this a thing or not? I'll describe it for the people that are watching. So there is an hourglass. This is at the end of this like 30 years anniversary thing. And it zooms in on a grain of sand coming out of an hourglass, and then the grain of sand explodes. And that's it. Is that a trailer? So it's just like they did this video where it's like lots of people who worked on Mortal Kombat just saying like, hey, thank you to the Mortal Kombat community. You've kept us going 30 years. We couldn't have done it without you, blah, blah, blah. And then at the very end of it, there's just this like hourglass, and there's like bits of sand falling, and one bit of sand sort of seems to stop and then explodes. The last piece explodes as if it's like time running out. Now, obviously, Mortal Kombat for a while has done lots of, the story has had lots to do with time travel and things like that. So it could be something like that. It could be a tease for Mortal Kombat 12. But it's a little bit strange. They have been doing tons of Mortal Kombat stuff for the last like month, seemingly building up to some sort of announcement. I wouldn't be surprised if like in the E3 season, you know, where we've got like all of the big announcements, stuff like that, we got a new Mortal Kombat. I would love it. I like Mortal Kombat's easily my favorite fighting game series because I'm not like, I've never been into learning fighting games. Like I'm not going to sit down with one character and learn all of their combos and learn all of the moves and everything like that. But I like playing fighting games with like, with my wife, with my sister-in-law. Sometimes I'll play them a bit online, just messing around, having some fun. And Mortal Kombat's, you know, got that nice mix of like a cool campaign that's normally actually quite entertaining, lots of flashy moves, lots of interesting characters. Like, it's always just been a good time. Whereas like Street Fighter and Tekken, I feel, have moved much more towards the competitive fighting scene and like you learning all of these technical things. Which I'm not that interested in. Mortal Kombat, I think, has much more approached a normal fighting game audience of just like people who want to fight against their friends and have a bit of a laugh and see ridiculous things happen. And like the depth is there if you want to get into it. Like there's definitely is depth in the Mortal Kombat games, but it's like it doesn't force it on you. It's like, yeah, do whatever, just have a laugh, have some fun. So I'd be excited if there's a new Mortal Kombat. Like I would think it's cool. With how long the teaser been going on, I'd love it if they shadow dropped it. Imagine if, like, at Microsoft's conference in June next month, they would just sort of like, hey, and here's Mortal Kombat 12, and it's out now on Game Pass or something. I would, like, lose my mind. That would be absolutely amazing. So, very strange. But yeah, that Mortal Kombat thing, I saw loads of people saying yesterday, like, hey, there's a Mortal Kombat trailer, Mortal Kombat 12 trailer, and then I watched and it was just this grain of sand thing. It's like, no, this isn't really telling us anything about anything. It's not even definitely a trailer for Mortal Kombat 12. But yeah, very, very strange. Anyway, let's get on to the main topic. And I am going to go back through and read all of the stuff that people are saying in chat right now. I will consider your opinions for sure. But I want to say my piece first about this. So the topic is, for anyone who's just listening to this halfway through for whatever reason, are consoles better to play games on? Like, is the experience of playing games better on consoles than PC? And obviously this is something that's been steeped in kind of people have had their opinions for a very long time about it. There's all of those what are normally jokes about, you know, PC master race, which I assume are jokes, but sometimes you see people using that like unironically, and you think like, it does kind of make you sound a bit like an Nazi. Like as soon as you say the word master race, it's like, this doesn't sound good, this doesn't sound like a positive thing. But yeah, anyway, like PC gaming, obviously lots of people go on about how you get better resolutions, higher frame rates, higher resolutions, I guess, not better. Higher resolutions, higher frame rates, mods, cheaper games, all of that kind of stuff, which you can do on PC. And then on console, there's always the argument that the consoles are cheaper, although the games are more expensive. And, sometimes games are sort of more, what's the word, sort of focused on consoles, so they sometimes run a little bit better on consoles in various ways, and we'll get onto that in a bit. And then also, obviously, consoles have exclusives, which is becoming less of a thing now. Like, Microsoft is putting all their first-party games out on PC, as far as I know. I can't remember the last time we had an actual console exclusive on Xbox. And PlayStation are increasingly putting their first-party games on PC. Not like day and date, they do it like a year or two later. But you can kind of think like, back in the day, I always used to think like, people who just play PC, like, oh my god, you're missing out on like The Last of Us, and you're missing out on Uncharted and Spider-Man and all of that sort of stuff. And like people like that, I'd be like, you should buy a PlayStation so you can play them. I think, I always argued with Arrow saying like he should definitely buy a PlayStation to play them, and I think he did to get Spider-Man. And now it's like, oh, you could just wait, you'll get a better version of the game. It'll have all the DLC and everything like that, and hopefully it'll run better. I know Last of Us didn't. But, like, in theory, it'll run better, so just wait until it's out on PC, then you can play the better version of it. So it's like, the exclusive thing doesn't matter so much anymore. With the exception of Nintendo. Nintendo is still like, you're not going to be playing whatever the new Mario game is, or the new Zelda game, or anything like that on PC anytime soon without emulation. So, if you're into Nintendo games, you do still need to get a console. But if you're into Nintendo games, you know that already. I'm not talking to anyone. But I do want to so that's all kind of the argument that everyone knows. Everyone's rehashed a million times. Everyone understands PC gaming, expensive to buy the hardware, cheap to buy the games, but you can upgrade it, games look better, games run better, blah, blah, blah. Console gaming, cheaper to buy the hardware, more expensive to buy the games, but sometimes games are made exclusively for it, and sometimes games are sort of focused on it. Sometimes PC ports are a bit shoddy, whereas Xbox things are okay. My thinking is, and I've got a sort of slightly different perspective on this to a lot of people, I think, because I play games on a PC a lot of the time. You see me playing games on PC a lot of the time. And that's because when I'm streaming, I find it easier to stream and record footage off the PC. There's a bunch of different reasons for that. The biggest one really is that it's easy for me to record footage on a PC and have lots of different audio channels set up. Like, that's genuinely the biggest thing. Is that when I'm playing games on PC and I'm streaming and recording, I can make it so, I've got my microphone on one audio channel, I've got Discord on a different audio channel, I've got the game audio on a different audio channel, I've got game chat or whatever, especially in Warzone, on a different audio channel. All of those things are separate. And so that kind of customization helps me a bunch. Like, it makes my life a lot easier. And with the consoles, there are ways to do some of that, at least not all of it, but most of it. But it's a pain because a console, generally on the back of it, you've got a HDMI port, and that's it. Like, you don't have you used to have an optical out as well, which made life a lot easier. But now you generally just have a HDMI port on the back, and on the controller, if you're lucky, you've got an aux port that will work, so you can send the audio out through that. Although bloody PlayStation or PlayStation 5 decided to make it so you can't send audio out of HDMI and the aux port on a controller. You have to choose one or the other, which just sucks. Like, that's really annoying. You can, like, on the Xbox you can do both, but on a PlayStation you can't, and that's very annoying. But anyway, yeah, so basically for me, for streaming, I find it a little bit easier to do it all on PC. That just makes my life much simpler. And that's why generally when I ask for review codes or stream, codes to stream games, I tend to ask for games on PC. Again, just makes life much easier. But when I am playing games for fun, so when I'm playing games and I'm not streaming it, I almost exclusively play it on console. I can't remember the last time I played a game on PC and I wasn't streaming, or I wasn't just, like, doing it because of, like, my content creator stuff. Whenever I play games for fun, I play on console. Like, so downstairs, me and my wife, we've got, like, in my mind, the dream setup. We've got two 55-inch TVs. We've got two Xbox Series X's, two PlayStation 5s, two Nintendo Switches, and we can both play games at the same time. Sometimes we play games together, like we just played Dead Island 2 all the way through together, which was awesome. We play Call of Duty together sometimes and stuff like that. And then sometimes, one of us will be watching YouTube and the other one will be playing a game, or we'll both be playing completely separate games, whatever. And it's like, I love it. It's a perfect setup. And I love that experience of just sitting on a sofa with my big TV. It's got HDR. I've got a decent sound setup, and everything looks good. Now, I am fully aware that if I was playing a lot of those same games, because I play Xbox more than anything, like I play Xbox way more than I play PlayStation, and like say I play Forza Horizon 5, which I play quite a lot when I'm not streaming. If I'm playing that game, I'm fully aware I can play that on PC. I actually have the game. Like, I mean, obviously I've got the game on Game Pass, so I've got it on Game Pass for PC. I think I might even have it on Steam. I think they gave me a code on Steam in the end. But I have that game. I could play it on PC at a high frame rate, at a high resolution. I could play it and I could use whatever peripherals I wanted. I could do it with keyboard and mouse if I wanted to. I know I could on Xbox, but that'd be a pain. And I could do it on HDR if I want. My monitor supports HDR. My PC is strong enough to like do whatever settings I want. I can add ray tracing and all stuff like that. But the problem is, it's all a massive faff. Like, it's literally all a massive faff. And Forza Horizon 5 is one of the best examples of that. That when I played Forza Horizon 5 on my Xbox, I downloaded the game, I started the game up, and from the second I play it, and anyone who hasn't played a Forza game, it's a driving game, and the Forza Horizon games always start with this big race. Before you even get to a menu or anything, it kicks you into this big, crazy race where there's like loads of stuff happening, kind of shows off the island, shows off some of the vehicles. You jump between different vehicles. It looks spectacular. It's just awesome. On Xbox, I was just like immediately like, let's go. Started up the game, immediately into that, having a wonderful experience. HDR working perfectly. It looked beautiful. The frame rate and everything like that was fine for me because it's running 60 frames a second on Xbox Series X. Just had an amazing time. I loaded up the same game because I wanted to stream it, and I loaded up the same game on PC, and immediately I'm like, oh, this doesn't look right. Like, the textures aren't, like, the level of detail thing isn't going in. So immediately I'm opening it up, and I'm like, okay, I need to turn HDR off, because HDR on PC, for whatever reason, doesn't ever look that good to me. Like, maybe my monitor's not that good at HDR, whatever. But anyway, so HDR is a bit weird, so I need to turn it off. Sometimes Windows does an annoying thing of automatically putting HDR on, even though I've said in Windows to make sure it never uses it ever. But still, sometimes it does it. And then so I'm like, oh, okay, the textures are kind of popping in, so I need to change that. And then I'm like, the frame rate's good, but it's not quite like a solid 120 frames a second with everything on Ultra. So like maybe I'll turn like a couple of these things down. Maybe I'll turn ray tracing off because I want the frame rate to be a bit higher. And then I'll play for a few seconds, and then I'll pause it again and be like, maybe I could turn the shadows down a little bit, or maybe I need to turn like distance detail up a little bit, and I'll go through that, and then I'll play for a little bit, and then I'll pause it again and be like, no, it's not quite right, like maybe it's a little bit juddery or something, and then I'll have to look up a forum and be like, hey, is anyone else having this problem? And then it's not like you can just look up, hey, is anyone else having this problem on PC? It'll be, hey, is anyone else having a problem on PC who's also running a 3080, has 32 gigabytes of RAM, has a Ryzen 9 5900X? And then if you manage to find someone else has the same problem, they might be like, oh yeah, well, I just shut down like my Logitech software and that fixed it. It's like, oh, I don't have Logitech software, but do I have some other piece of software on my PC that might be causing these problems? So then you start like switching stuff like, okay, what if I turn off Shadow Play? What if I turn off the Steam overlay? What if I turn off Discord? Like, what sort of thing might be doing it? Is it OBS or something like that? And I end up going through this entire troubleshooting thing pretty much every time I start a new game. Like, I would say 90% of the time when I start a new game on PC, if it's like, if it's an indie game, then not so much. But if it's like a AAA game, most of the time, my first half an hour or so with the game is spent looking through menus, trying to work out what they've called the things that I'm used to turning on or off, trying to work out what's the best balance of like frame rate, resolution, graphical quality, and, making it smooth as well, because sometimes frame rate might be great sometimes, but then occasionally it stutters and it dips and stuff like that, which is annoying. Work out which hard drive's the best hard drive to put it on to avoid sort of like caching issues and stuff like that. I'll end up doing all of that. Often I'll end up having to search for stuff. I'll end up having to search through the Steam forums, the Steam discussion groups, like searching on Twitter or Reddit, see if other people have had the same problem. And it just sucks the fun out of that first half an hour of the game, which to me is normally the most fun part of a game. Like, I'm someone who absolutely loves new games. I really enjoy new games. And part of that is just discovering a new game, discovering the mechanics, discovering the world, seeing what it looks like, all of that sort of thing. And if that first half an hour is marred by just having to faff, like just constantly having to faff, then it kind of ruins the whole thing for me. And like, I wanted to talk about this partly because Redfall's coming out today. And I know Redfall on Xbox Series X is 30 frames a second. I know that for a fact. Like, they've said performance mode 60 frames a second is going to come sometime later. It's launching at 30 frames a second. And on PC, apparently, for some people it's working pretty well, and for some people they're struggling to get 60 frames a second even with like a 4070 Ti. And that makes me think, like, in my head I'm thinking, which of those would I prefer? And like, logically, normally I'd be like, well, I'd much rather play it on PC, and that's why I asked for a code on PC. I've got a Steam code for it today. But I've asked for all of that because I'm thinking that I'm going to be able to get it running at 60 frames a second. That's going to be a better experience. But then part of me is thinking, but when I load up Redfall today, I'm going to be faffing. I'm going to immediately be like trying to work out which options make a difference, which options are the best ones. And it's not like, you always get people saying sort of like, oh, well, once you know what you're doing, then it's really easy. Some people will just go in and immediately turn shadows down to low or something, or they'll turn ray tracing off, or blah, blah, blah. But it's like every game does stuff a little bit differently. Jedi Survivor that I was playing over the last week, you could go through every setting in that to try and see what made a difference. Ray tracing made a bit of difference. None of the other graphics options made the slightest difference. Like, I could play at 1080p on low settings and get 55 frames a second, or 1440p on epic settings and get 55 frames a second. Like, the game's just broken. It's just like the port is bad. And it's like, I feel like nearly everyone, no matter whether, you always get people on PC saying like, oh, I don't have to worry about that. Like, my PC is just so powerful. I can do anything. But it's just not true. Like, it's literally not true. You look at people playing Warzone who have these insane PCs. They have like, they build the most crazy PCs, and then they're running Warzone with all the settings turned down to low because it like increases visibility and they want the frame rate to be as high as possible. And they make the game look like absolute ass. Like, I saw Tactical Brit was posting about he'd done a thing where he'd managed to get like 300 and something frames a second in Warzone, but he'd literally paid someone to come and have a look at his PC and change the settings for him and to set it up properly. And I was like, that's an ultimate faff of like buying a video game, and then if you want to play it in a certain way, paying someone to do the settings for you because it's so complicated. So if you know what you're doing, it's still complicated. There's a lot of trial and error. I think that's the biggest thing. There's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of see if this works, play it a bit, see if this works. And there's so many variables, what software you have running in the background, what drivers you've got for your graphics card, for your BIOS, like what BIOS version you've got, what types of hard drives you've got, what types of memory, the timings on your memory. It's not enough just to have 32 gigabytes of RAM. You really want to have like CL16 RAM or something crazy. It's just like there's so much faff involved in making a game run the way you want on PC. Now, a lot of people would say, I think, and again, I haven't checked the comments yet, a lot of people would probably say, but the point is on PC, you have that customization, you have that opportunity to make those changes. But my problem with it is that yeah, that's great. It is great that you can fine tune a game to be, if you care about resolution more than anything else and image quality, you can do that. If you care about frame rate more than anything else, you can do that. You can get a lot of games, especially well-made games, you can get a lot of games running on surprisingly cheap PCs. And then if you want to spend an absolute fortune on a PC and get stuff running at insane resolutions and frame rates, you can do that too. That's a wonderful thing. But I would argue that still, most games, when you load them up, like the first time you load them up, you have to do some messing. You have to do some faffing because the game doesn't immediately know what you want to prioritize. The game doesn't immediately know what you want to do. So you're still spending a little bit of time, well, sometimes if the game works well, it's a little bit of time at the beginning. In my experience, it's often quite a lot of time. Like half an hour to me is quite a lot of time to set something up when I want to be playing a new game, when I want to be experiencing a new game. And in some games, Warzone, I still change settings every now and then with Warzone. I still change stuff all the time because, there's so many games that aren't very well optimized for PC, or they have problems and stuff like that, or they have conflicts and they have extra stuff problems. And it's like, in my mind, the value of buying a game, sitting down, and just accepting it, and being able to just enjoy the experience, regardless of necessarily what the frame rate is or what the resolution is probably more valuable to me than being able to make the frame rate and the resolution better and the image quality better at the cost of a lot of faff. So, like, when I play a game on console, if I play Redfall on Xbox, which I probably will because it's on Game Pass, so I'll probably play it on Xbox when I'm playing with my wife, then I don't even know what resolution it runs at. It might be 4K, it might be 1440p, it might be somewhere in between. I don't really care. I know the frame rate will be 30 frames a second. But the important thing is, I know I can't change it. So I'm not going to be sitting there thinking, oh, what should I do? Could I be having a better experience? Could I be making some tweaks to make it run better? I'm literally just going to load up the game and then play it as is. And I've skipped all of that faff immediately. On consoles, I know there is increasingly a bit more faff. Like, I like it when games have a quality mode and a performance mode. So normally they have like a quality mode that's like, okay, we'll lock it to 30 frames a second, but we'll have all the nice graphic stuff turn on. Or you can play at 60 frames a second or beyond, but it'll look a bit worse. And then normally I'll choose the 60 frames a second thing and go on my way. Sometimes there's a bit of faff with that of like, okay, which one's actually better? It does annoy me a little bit. There's been a few games that have come out, Forspoken being one of them, where there's like 6 different settings. It's like, do you want quality mode with ray tracing on? Do you want performance mode with ray tracing on? Do you want performance mode without ray tracing on? Do you want performance mode and we're going to try and hit 120 frames a second? Or are you happy with 60 frames a second? Do you want quality mode where we're going to have like the frame rate syncing thing that some TVs can do? There's like a bunch of different settings, and it's like, I don't want this. I don't want to have to go through 6 settings and play through the game a little bit to try and work out which one's better, especially if you have to go back to the main menu to change them. That's super annoying. Like, I would really, like, in my mind, I just want quality mode, performance mode. That's it. Like, I'm fine with that. I don't want any more tweaking or anything like that. Or if there is tweaking, for it to be like the defaults to make sense. And on console, that's possible. Like, they can't really do it on PC because there's so many different hardware setups. Just saying quality mode and performance mode doesn't make a lot of sense because obviously they've got no idea what components you've got in your PC. They've got no idea what frame rate it's possible of doing at different settings. So there's always going to be trial and error, like every single time. I know Steam actually tried to get around this issue a while ago where they started making those, like, was it called Steambox or something? I don't know. They had a name for it where it was like basically PCs that had standardized components. So if you loaded up a game and it had been programmed with this sort of stuff in it to recognize that you're running one, it could be like, okay, you've got like a Steambox 4 or whatever. That means that we can automatically set up a quality mode or a performance mode, and we know how it'll run because we've tested the game on the exact same components. And I think that's like not a bad idea. Like, that's not a terrible thing. But yeah, so that's basically it. That's basically my argument is I think console gaming is better, even if the frame rate's worse, even if the resolution's worse, even if anything else is worse, because I'm not faffing around trying to make it better. I'm not faffing around trying to improve it. I don't have that doubt. You know, that little bit of doubt in the back of your mind where it's like, if I change this one setting, this might work a little bit better. If I like updated this or I switched off this piece of software in the background, this experience could be slightly better. And with Jedi Survivor, I mean, partly because that game was so broken, the optimization of it was so broken. Although again, that's, while it's like not fair to look at an edge case, I would say it's almost not an edge case. You know, you look at games that have had kind of broken PC ports lately. With AAA gaming, it feels like that's quite a lot of them. Like, that's a fairly significant number of them. Like, with PC gaming, I've always got that thing. Jedi Survivor went on for basically the entire game. I was like, why is the frame rate chugging a little bit in this section? Like, could I do something to fix it? Is there a setting I could change? And that's taken me out of the game. It's taken me out of my enjoyment of the thing. Whereas on console, even if the frame rate's bad, even if the resolution's bad, even if the image quality's bad, I don't really think about it as much. Like I said, most of the console games I've played over the last 2-3 years, I have no idea what resolution I was running at. I have no idea what frame rate I was running at. You know, generally I feel like I can tell the difference between 30 and 60 frames a second, but some games go above 60 frames a second. Sometimes I can kind of notice it. A lot of the time I can't really. And it's kind of, you know, because I bought a fancy TV with HDMI 2.1 so it can do 120 frames a second, 4K HDR and all that sort of stuff. But it's like, the lack of faff is so valuable to me. The lack of like worrying about whether or not I should be changing something is just so much better. Anyway, I'm going to go and read a load of these comments, a load of the comments that people have been sending me over here. So I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning. So apologies if your comment doesn't get read out for a while. I will get to it at some point. So, Robert Very said, I play on PC but use Xbox Live and a controller, so I identify as a hybrid. I mean, like aside from all the other stuff, I still do prefer using a controller to a keyboard and mouse, but a big part of that for me is because I'm streaming, and I'm always conscious when I'm on a keyboard that like the sound is getting picked up by the microphone. And I know there's lots of different things you can do. You don't need to sit there and be like, have you tried using a noise gate? I know there's ways to like mitigate it, but it sort of doesn't mitigate it completely. I actually switched from a mechanical keyboard that I liked very much to a membrane keyboard just because it was quieter. And it's kind of, that's to me the biggest reason I use a controller more than anything. But also because I switch between PC gaming and Xbox so much, I find it a lot easier to use a controller, so I'm not like having to learn how to control a game twice, if that makes sense. I did play a bit of Battlefield on mouse and keyboard yesterday, and I really enjoyed it. There's a video that I posted late last night about me playing Battlefield, and in that video, I was using mouse and keyboard for the whole time. And I feel like I wasn't doing any differently to how I do when I'm playing on keyboard, so when I'm playing on controller. So that was good. Just reading a bit. Why So Salty said, I'm a console player on PlayStation. I work on a PC every day, and so just don't find a PC gaming appealing as you want a break from work. Makes sense to my brain. Yeah, I quite like that distinction. I quite like sort of doing my content creation stuff up here on a PC, and then when I'm sitting downstairs on the sofa with a controller in my hand, that's like a very different space. Like it's a very different feeling, and I like that. I mean, I do also, using a big TV and a sofa and a controller is a lot more enjoyable to me than on a PC. And again, it's one of those things where people are like, but you can use a PC in your living room. And it's like, yeah, you can. But like, and I've done that before, but it's like using a mouse and keyboard on like when you're sitting on a sofa is always a pain. There's various different ways of doing it where you have like tray type things, like bench type things to put them on, or you're leaning onto a coffee table, or you just have them on your lap or whatever. It's not ideal. And as much as people say like, oh, you can do everything on your controller, it's like, yeah, but there's a lot of things that you kind of need to use mouse and keyboard. You know, something will pop up that needs you to log in or something, or you need to like mess around with some drivers or something. And then PCs tend to be a bit noisier. They tend to be a little bit more like obnoxious unless you specifically build a very small form factor one, and then it's spending a lot more money and it's overheating and whatever. There's so many problems with having a PC in a living room setup. Whereas a console, it's like you buy the console, you put it down somewhere near your TV, wire it up with like, what is it? You need a HDMI cable and a power cable, and that's it. And then you use a wireless controller, and you just sit on your sofa and play. And your TV is probably already pretty good because, you know, you've got it for films and TV and everything. You just got an amazing experience already there to go. And then if you're playing PC gaming, it's like, okay, so you need a desk, you need your like monitor. Your monitor probably isn't as good as a TV, unless you're spending thousands on it. Like sitting at a desk is inherently to me less comfortable than sitting on my sofa. There's just a lot of things that like make it kind of less fun to me. It's all stuff that like I feel like people don't talk about as much when they're talking about this comparison. Just moving down. Affa said, getting an equivalent or better experience on PC when compared to a console is not price competitive, but you enjoy PC gaming as another hobby, tinkering and tech, etc. And that's a big thing. Like what Affas is saying now is something that I completely agree with, that I do enjoy getting new PC components. I do enjoy changing stuff on my PC sometimes when I'm not playing a game. So like I quite like, you know, I tinker all the time with my stream overlays, with how I record things, all my editing stuff. I mess around with that stuff all the time. Like my setup is constantly changing. And I do that because I enjoy it. I just don't enjoy it when I get a new game and then I have to do it. Like, then I just want to play the new game. I don't want to be messing around with stuff. Carrying on. Ultraclart said, I was a PC player for years, got sick of forever upgrading, so invested in Xbox so much simpler. Yeah, I mean, like the Xbox Series X, that came out in 2020, I want to say? And it's like 3 years ago, and it's still playing games like, I mean, well, Redfall's now stuck at 30 frames a second, which sucks. But it's still coping pretty well. It's doing very, very, like, it's running everything well. On PC, it's always like, okay, well now the 40 series graphics cards coming out, so you really, like if you want to have the best experience, you need to get a 4090, which is like another £2,000 or something. And then like I'm sure later this year or next year there'll be like a 50 series, and then that'll be the next big thing. And it's like obviously you don't have to upgrade, but there's always kind of, for people like me that are, consumer idiots, there's a feeling that I feel like I should. I mean, I haven't done. I'm still on a 3080 because I can't afford a 40 series. But it's definitely an idea. Alpha said, complete sense, but approach NVIDIA really spoiled the space. The 70 class cards jumping so much in price. It is insane how much graphics cards jumped in price. Like, I remember when it was like the 1080, was it the 1080 Ti? And I feel like that was like £800 or something. And everyone was like, whoa, this is expensive. Like, this is an expensive graphics card. But maybe it's worth it. And I was thinking like, God, normally £800 is like how much I'd spend on a PC back then. Like that would be absolutely crazy. And I was lucky, like I think I ended up getting a 1080 around then. And I was like, yeah, I can't justify getting the Ti. And then it was like the 20 series card came out and everything like went up by like £300 or £400. I was like, this is quite ridiculous. And then it was like the 30 series came out and the 3090 was, like something ridiculous, like 1,500 quid or something. And then the 40 series come out and it's like £2,000 for a 4090. And it's just like, it's just insane how quickly the price, like now I would say to get like a good gaming PC, to get like a mid to high end gaming PC, whereas a few years ago, you probably could have done it for £500. I would say now you're looking at least £1,000, if not probably a bit more. Like for me to upgrade my PC now, I'd be looking at about £1,500 to £2,000 if I wanted a PC that's better than the one I've got now. And that just seems utterly insane to me. Like that seems completely crazy. Like I bought the cheapest possible Intel card I could the other day, so I could upload to YouTube in AV1 to make it all lovely and sharp for you. And that was like the cheapest budget Intel card I possibly could, and that was still over £100, I think, or around £100. It was super expensive, super annoying. Let's have a look. House UK said PC for the special stuff, flight sims, racing sims, used to play MMOs, but I haven't got time for those. Console for chilling. The gap is small these days. You're not playing some PC only game. If you're not playing some PC only game, yeah, 100% House. I definitely agree that like there's some games that I'd prefer to play on PC. Like there's some games like real-time strategy games, or like you say, a lot of the sim games. If you've got a steering wheel setup or a flight stick setup or something like that, then PC is still better for a lot of specialist games. It's surprising how many of those games you can play on console. Like, I'm always surprised that you can play Civilization 6 on console, you can play Planet Coaster on console, you can play Flight Simulator on console. Like, that always surprises me. And they're not, as good experiences, but, like, they're possible. Like, they're slowly drawing, making that gap a bit smaller. But definitely, if you're more heavily invested into one of those kind of more technical games, I think that a PC is much, much better for that sort of stuff. And yeah, MMOs, I would say Final Fantasy XIV, which is one of the biggest MMOs at the moment, does work exceptionally well on PlayStation, like incredibly well. Like I didn't believe how well it could work, especially having like all of the action bars and stuff like that. But it just is. It's really intuitive. It works really well. The UI is a bit of a mess, but other than that, it works really cool. But yeah, so I think that gap's getting a bit smaller. And the performance gap, like, again, I've got a PC that I think is quite good. Like, I've got a 3080, I've got a Ryzen 9 5900X, 32 gigabytes of RAM, fast hard drives, all of that stuff. And still, when I play a lot of new games that I have them on both Xbox and PC, either because they're on Game Pass or because I get given a code for both or whatever, I don't notice that much difference. Like, there's some difference. Sometimes games are a little bit better, like in terms of frame rate and stuff like that on my PC, but it's not huge. Like I can play Warzone on my PS5 or my Xbox Series X, and I can play Warzone on my PC, and the experience isn't that different at all, really. Like, it's like if I really thought about it, I could probably spot some differences and spot some like, oh, those shadows aren't quite as sharp, or like, oh, the frame rate chugs a little bit here, whereas on my PC it would stay smooth. But it's like, for the amount of money that these things cost me, my Xbox was like 400 quid compared to my PC probably has, I don't know, like 1,200 quid's worth of stuff in it, something like that. Like that's insane that like the difference still isn't that big. The difference is still fairly small. Yeah, I find that's like kind of interesting in a way. Anyway, so carrying on down a little bit. Uh, a meme you saw recently, Texas P8, PC is better than console, but is your PC better than a console? It is true, like, consoles have just got insanely powerful lately. The PS5 and Xbox Series X are very, very capable machines. The fact that, like, the number of games that you can play at, like, 120 frames a second, and often sometimes, in 4K as well, which blows my mind, stuff like Forza and Fortnite and things like that. Fortnite's a good example, actually, of, on my PC, I can't make Fortnite look as good as it looks on my console. Like, I can't find a combination of settings. I've tried following loads of guides and stuff like that. Something they do on console, it just looks and runs better. Like, I've been much more impressed with it on console. And that sort of like, there's the odd game like that where it's just like, I guess because they've really dialed it in on the exact hardware and consoles, that they just make it look really good. Plus HDR helps. My TV's downstairs, HDR is super good. And I don't use HDR on my PC, and HDR does make some difference for some games, especially colorful games like that. High Lord of Terror said, for many years I'd say PC was superior experience, but the gap's closed massively. Consoles can achieve 4K and high frame rates now. I don't feel like I'm making do on console now. And like that thing about like, it used to be like, oh, on PC you can play at 4K. I don't think that's going to carry on into the future very much. Like, do you think there's going to be that many people who are buying 5090s so they can play games at 8K? Like, I doubt it. And like, is the frame rates, I know people are starting to get like 300 frames a second, and you can get monitors that display 240 or 265 frames a second. Do you think that's going to carry on? Are we going to get like, is it going to be commonplace to see 500 frames per second monitors and things like that? Is that like, are we reaching the point where it's like physically impossible for things to just display images that quickly? And like, surely it's diminishing returns. Like, surely the difference between 4K and 8K is less than the difference between 4K and 1440p or 1440p and 1080p. Like, surely as we get like higher resolutions and as we get higher frame rates, there becomes a point where it doesn't matter anymore. But you're still doubling the amount of processing power required. You're still doubling the like or halving the timings that you need for things. Like, I just don't know how much that's going to end up mattering. And if once consoles get to a point where it's like, hey, this is good enough, then fine. I mean, there still are problems with consoles. Like, the CPUs still aren't amazing. And they often don't have a lot of RAM and stuff like that. Like, there's still issues with them that mean that the PC is much better in some regards for some games. There's still things that just like consoles can't keep up with. But it's like, how long will that last? Like, the Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5 are seriously impressive. To be fair, the Xbox One X and the PlayStation 4 Pro were seriously impressive too. Right. Madago said, that said, of course, high-end rigs do play games better, but then all the variables of PC mean games may be broken out of the box for many. Yeah, and I mean, and that is my experience of like nearly every AAA game I've played for a while now. When you've played it on PC, it's been broken in some way. I'd say Call of Duty is quite a good exception. Call of Duty does tend to work on PC. Sometimes there's weird problems, and sometimes there's weird things that you have to fix, but generally it works pretty well. But a lot of other AAA games are pretty broken on PC, which is a problem. Space is always... House UK said, whoever decided to put a mic on a PS5 controller should be burning in hell for making multiplayer games a noisy hell. Yeah, it's like the PlayStation 5 controller mic, I think was a really good idea, but why by default is it enabled? It should be by default muted. Like, it just seems insane that the default option for that is to be enabled. You should have to go into a menu to enable it, not just press a button on it. House UK said, console's big win is easy and cheap. No spending 2 hours and 15 restarts to find that annoying driver issue. I rarely get asked to help someone set up a console, and if I do, it's a one and done. Yep, 100%. Streaming's easier to do well on PC over console. Used to stream on console as paints up. Yeah, that's what I was saying at the beginning, Salty. That like that's why I play a lot of games on PC, is essentially because of streaming and content creation. Whenever I'm not streaming or making videos, I just play on console. Like, but that does make it much easier. Do I have that set up in the living room? What, the 2 TVs and the consoles? Yeah. Our living room, essentially, like, we have a big sofa that can be brought out. It's like a big L-shaped sofa, but it can be turned into a giant sofa bed, which it basically always is. Me and my wife sit on that giant sofa bed with a blanket over us, each with our big TV and our consoles and stuff, and it is bliss. I absolutely love it. PlayStation 5 having Discord integration has been really good. Yeah. Benchmark Boy said, a lot of people don't realize, though, that consoles use dynamic resolution scaling to keep you at those frames. So most of the time, you're rendering at a lower resolution than what you think. But why does that matter, Benchmark Boy? Literally, why does that matter? If you don't notice that the resolution isn't as high as you thought it was, then it doesn't matter. Like, at no point am I going to be really enjoying a game, and then later someone be like, you know that game you were playing at 4K? Actually, it was running at 1440p. I'm not going to be like, oh, I hated that game now. Oh, I feel so lied to. It's like, it doesn't matter. If you don't notice, it doesn't matter. I would say with the dynamic resolution thing, I can't think of a time when I've been playing a game and been like, oh, the resolution's dropped massively. At least not for quite a long while. Like maybe during the Xbox One X time, maybe there was a time then when I noticed it with a couple of games. I seem to remember a couple of things being like, oh, suddenly this looks a bit weird. But generally you don't notice. And if you don't notice, then who cares? Jonah Murray says, I've loved the performance jump from moving to PC after console for game of 10 years, but you do miss the simplicity and plug and play. That's it. Like, the simplicity and plug and play thing is by far the best thing about consoles. And it still is. And it's like when people say, like, oh, why would you get an Xbox now when all the games are on PC? It's like, because with my Xbox, I can just switch it on and play games. I just switch it on and play games. Like, that's it. That's the benefit of it, like, to me. Like, and that is absolutely amazing. And it just works with my TV and my soundbar and everything. It just understands what's going on, and it lets me play, and I don't have to faff. And that's so, so nice. Jedi Survivor has a memory leak issue, doesn't it? I haven't noticed anything getting worse over time. Jedi Survivor has a lot of issues, though. It runs like crap is the main one. And it does an annoying thing where if you do something like you turn ray tracing off and then on again, the frame rate like basically halves. So you have to restart the game in order to go back to it. It sucks. Tax-free Charlie said he's with so salty, saying gaming on a console separates him from his desk or PC. All that. God, I have so many throat problems when I'm doing this podcast. Ooh, I need to just take time to drink and breathe when I'm talking, really. Jedi Survivor has problems with 7800 XVD and 4090 rigs. In terms of tactical Brit, that's the difference between people who want to compete professionally versus people hunting a better experience. Yeah, it is a difference. That's true. Like, yeah, it is like what Tactical Brit was doing of like making Warzone run at 300 frames a second and paying someone to do that. Obviously, not everyone's going to do that, but it's more that like it's just a sign of like it's hard to achieve those kind of things, even with the most expensive hardware you can buy. Then you have to pay someone to set it up. Like that's just. To me, that's insane. And then you're like running everything on low settings and everything like that to make it like so it's like competitive, but you know, it's running as fast as possible. I was just using that more as an example of like it's not user friendly. It's like it's very, very specialized. Fogger said, I've never thought setting up a game on PC is a problem before starting to play it. What do you mean, Fogger? What, you've never started playing a game on PC and then thought like messing around with the options is annoying? That's crazy to me. Like nearly every game I play, I load it up, play a little bit, and then during like the intro cutscene or during the intro sequence, I'm like pausing it and messing around with settings. Nearly every time with AAA games, again, like indie game stuff are a bit different, but nearly every time I'm just like I'm not drawn into the game at the beginning. I'm sitting there staring at a bloody graphics menu. Sometimes I'm looking at the graphics menu before I start playing the game, which sucks. Texas says, I use the GeForce Experience app to set my graphics. I've heard a couple of people say that. For me, at least, whenever I use the GeForce thing where it's like optimize my games, it picks insane settings. Like, it will either pick something where it's like, hey, like, we know you've got a 1440p monitor, but we're going to try and make this game run at 4K with HDR on, and then it just, like, chugs loads. Or it will, like, turn everything way down and be like, hey, but you're getting, like, 1 million frames a second now. It just does really weird stuff that I don't understand why it makes those choices. Maybe it works well on, like, some setups, you know, like some combinations of hardware. Maybe the GeForce Experience works better than others. For me, it doesn't work very well. But at least, well, I say that, I haven't tried it for probably a few years because when I did try it, it didn't work very well. Maybe it works better now. I think I've tried it with Warzone before where, like, I understand the settings in Warzone quite well because I've messed with them so much. And like, I just saw what it did and was like, this is terrible. You're putting up stuff that switching stuff on that doesn't matter and is incredibly taxing on the frame rate. And you're turning off stuff that does matter and makes it look better and doesn't really affect the frame rate. It just was a bad. Yeah, like Athos was saying, keeps trying to put ray tracing on because Nvidia's like, hey, everybody loves ray tracing, right? You don't mind playing at 20 frames a second as long as you got ray tracing set to ultra. It's like, shut up, Nvidia. Ray tracing doesn't work and it doesn't even look that good. I saw a really good thing about why ray tracing doesn't look good. I think I mentioned this in another podcast, but someone was talking about how in Cyberpunk with the new path tracing thing, they were talking about how, yeah, I did talk about this in a podcast, about how when game designers are making the game, they often don't think about it in terms of ray tracing being a thing because most people can't access that on their hardware. So they choose the lighting and they make the lighting look very dramatic. And then when you start simulating the lighting and getting rid of that pre-rendered lighting, suddenly a lot of stuff like loses its drama, like loses the intention. It's literally like sort of, you know, going to a film set and saying like, put away all your lights and all your lighting rigs. We're just going to use the sun. And like, you know, everything looking kind of washed out and crap as a result. And I thought that's a really interesting way of looking at it. I hadn't really thought about that. But I agree. Sometimes ray traced games look bad. Like, you know, look worse. But a lot of the time I just turn it off because it runs like crap. You think we'll see better performance on PC once the last generation of consoles is fully dead? I mean, but when the last generation of consoles is fully dead, the next generation of consoles will come out, and this generation will be the last generation of consoles. It's always going to happen. Like there's just more people playing on consoles than are on PC. So games are always going to have like consoles first and foremost, and consoles are always going to be a few years behind. Like, just they have to be. Like, I imagine, I don't know for sure, but I would hazard a guess that whatever the next Xbox is and whatever the next PlayStation is are probably basically designed now, using technology that is available now. And like, there'll be tweaks, obviously, and they'll be like, you know, they'll be doing lots of negotiating about how to keep the price down and what to include and what to not include. But I imagine they basically have an idea of what it is, and then we won't see those consoles until like, you know, 2027 or something. But they'll basically be using hardware that's about now. Whereas PC will have like, you know, the 60 series Nvidia cards by then, and they'll be like leaving whatever the next consoles are in the dust. Mad Jock says, I'll stick to my Xbox Series X. It seems to play all your games at 1440p and up to 120 frames a second. Yeah, and it does. I mean, it depends a little bit on what games you play as well. Because, like, yeah, if you play like Forza Horizon and Fortnite and Warzone, then you've got a lot of, you know, Call of Duty multiplayer. You've got a lot of games that just run spectacularly well on console. So it's like, why would you switch over to PC? You're going to struggle to get those games to run as well on PC as they do on console, no matter how much money you spend on your PC. And it's like, but then you play some other games like Redfall coming out today, and it's like, oh, on console it's stuck at 30 frames a second for now at least. And so that might be a bigger problem. Maui said, here we go, some argument maybe. Are you blaming bad optimized game to PC hardware because majority of games runs higher FPS on PC compared to consoles? I don't know what you mean by blaming bad optimizations on PC. I mean, kind of, the bad optimization is the fault of PC gaming being like having no standardized setup, having lots of different components. Everyone's got a vaguely different PC setup. Even aside from hardware, you've got all of the software that you're running. It, like in the background, is going to be slightly different from someone else's. But like, my point is more just that with these games, whether they're badly optimized or not on PC, you tend to load them up and have to make changes based on your hardware. You tend to have to load them up and do a bit of faffing. And if the game is amazing, and you know, like Diablo 4 is an example of this. Like I said, Call of Duty is a pretty good example of this. Not perfect, but pretty good. There's a few examples of AAA games where you can load them up and pretty much just play. Like, the standard settings are pretty good and you can do it. Unfortunately, in my experience at least, and I play pretty much every AAA game that comes out, I would say that's the minority. The majority of games, the PC ports require quite a lot of optimizing, quite a lot of kind of tinkering to make them run well on your setup, because your setup's going to be very different from everyone else's. So they don't just have a quality mode or performance mode. You've got to like decide what it is. And often it's not very helpful when you have like high, ultra, medium, because a lot of the time, you know, you put stuff on ultra and there'll be like 20 settings that don't really make a difference to your frame rate, and then one thing, whether it's like post-processing or volumetric clouds or shadows or ray tracing, it's normally ray tracing now, that makes all of the difference. And it's like, actually, you want everything to be on ultra except for that one thing that you want to turn down low. And you have to find out what that thing is in every single game you play. And that's kind of irritating. And then even then, you're always going to have a bit of doubt about did you do it right, because there's very unlikely to be guides for your specific setup. So other people are going to try things that are going to work for them, but not for you, because everyone has a slightly different PC. And that's kind of annoying. Whereas Xbox, everyone's got the same bloody Xbox, so it's all fine. PC gaming is like buying a sports car. More effort day to day and hugely more expensive, but the Ford Focus is good for day to day and get where you need to be. Yeah, I think that's a fairly good analogy, House UK, and a good example of why, a lot of kids, when they're growing up, are like, yeah, I want to have a sports car. When I'm older, I want to have a Ferrari. I want to have a Lamborghini. And then a lot of people, when they get to be adults, is like, God, that would be a nightmare. I don't want to be spending like £9,000 a year on tires. Like, that would be bizarre. I don't want to be spending so much money on fuel. I don't want to be worrying every time I go over a speed bump, whether it's going to rip the bottom of my car off and cost tens of thousands of pounds to fix. Like, most people understand why having a sports car would actually be a nightmare, whereas just having a car you can just use is quite nice. That's quite a nice comparison. I like it. Your 980 Ti was £560. At that time, a Titan X was 1,100. I don't think I ever knew anyone that had a Titan when they used to do the Titan cards. I don't think I ever knew anyone that actually got one. It was always seen as like Titan's like the ridiculous thing. Why So Soul said, if all you do for your relaxation, then I can see why you'd spend money on a PC rig. But if you have other hobbies, console's just the best move in terms of bang for a buck, in your opinion. Yeah, Why So Soul, I agree. I'd also say, and this is a purely anecdotal thing and not necessarily true, I think people who are playing on console are generally a bit happier. I think there's a lot more toxic gaming on PC. There's a lot more people getting super angry. Like, you read Reddit and Twitter and stuff. There's a lot of people getting like insanely angry about PC ports and things like that. Like, properly getting so frustrated. And I can understand why, because the faff and everything like that is so frustrating. Whereas like, if you play on console, you can just enjoy games. You can just have a good time with them. It just doesn't matter much. I was surprised when I was playing through Jedi Survivor, that like on PC everyone's like, oh my god, this is terrible, I'm getting 55 frames a second instead of 60, and I was like that. I was feeling like that, like, oh my god, like, how can I cope? And then there's people playing it on like just normal Xboxes being like, hey, I'm playing at 30 frames a second and it's great, I'm having an awesome time. I saw a lot of the reviews, like, the IGN review where they were talking about playing it on 30 frames a second on quality mode or whatever, and it was just like, yeah, this game's great. And it's like, maybe they're having more fun because they're not stressing about getting 5 more frames a second out of it. Maybe. House UK said your PC setup costs you over 10 times what Series X cost you. It's not 10 times better, it's just different. Yeah, for sure. You can't play Star Citizen on console. That is true. That is another benefit of console. You don't have to play Street Fighter. Street Fighter. What am I talking about? Star Citizen. I was thinking about Street Fighter because I was thinking there's a demo that I haven't played yet. Ray tracing is going to take another console generation of consoles to fully take off. I don't know if ray tracing is ever going to properly take off. I just don't think it's that good. I think it's just insanely expensive for what it is, and it's just like the end result doesn't look that much better. I'm not sure when it will end up mattering. Faffing's your new favorite word. So much faff. So much faff. Anyway, that's me done for today. We got to the end of the comments. Thank you so much for that little conversation. I enjoyed it. But in conclusion, I think console gaming's better because there's less faff and I can just focus on enjoying the game rather than messing around with stupid graphic settings menus. But now I'm going to head on over to Twitch. Right after the stream ends, I'm going to be heading on over to twitch.tv/Geeky Pastimes. There might be a very, very, very short break while I go get a drink and reply to a couple of emails, but I'm going to be heading over to Twitch in a second to play Redfall, and we'll probably be faffing with the graphics menu for a good half an hour before we really start playing the game. So if you want to come see me exactly what I'm talking about and why it's such a faff, check it out, twitch.tv/Geeky Pastimes. Thanks so much to everyone who's been watching today. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the podcast, and goodbye.